1 2 test us 1 2 1 2 test us 1 2 test us 1 2 1 2. Do a quick sound check here, and then we'll do games 4 and 5. Let's see if I can adjust my monitor a little bit to center me a little bit. All right, we're gonna turn on the old stream chat monitor. Whoops, there we go. Setting my computer out of whack. All right, so now let's see. Where does this start? Around 114. All right, so let's go to the color commentator guys here just to get some sound checking going. Okay, it sounds pretty good to me. You can still hear them pretty well, I think. So, this is the game 4 after MARU. I believe it was MARU who requested the extended break. And it does help him briefly in winning this game 4 very quickly. And here is MARU in the right side of the map. And MARU, did I say MARU? Yeah, MARU, and then in red, and then in blue, and the left, west, southwest side of the map is going to be here you can see down here, Hero's base. I'm going to pause it really quickly already, because I want to point out that while Data C in general is sort of a medium-sized map, which I mentioned before, I think, because they're not actually spawning in the far northeast and far southwest, but are actually almost west center and east center, are not that far from each other. And so, you know, again, Hero is normally, you would say, have the advantage with smaller maps because he can do his harassment thing early and often while he gets his infrastructure going. There are some minerals in the middle here. I don't know if these are gold minerals, which are worth more than normal blue minerals, but there's never that many of them, and they mine so quickly that they run out very quickly. But when you're trying to build up a forest quickly and you just need minerals in particular, is the way to go. We'll see if we get a base or even sort of a mini base that's just for resource collection and or ground defense. Well, we'll just have to see. This is, I believe, the fastest game of the 5, even though MARU wins, and usually fast wins is Hero's thing. All right, try not to overload the mic here. So let's play the commentators. As we see going through, Kim Jun Ho. I should get Hero's name correct, his actual name. I thought the final 5th game, deciding game where Hero wins, was the shortest one, and it is still pretty short. But it's so rare for Hero to lose as quickly as he does here. And MARU, as a somewhat more conservative, traditional defensive Terran player, normally doesn't go for a win at 3, 4, 5 minutes. I believe he does. They're mentioning Bunny and how Bunny wants to play Hero. Bunny, of course, will regret that when he gives up a 3-1 lead to lose 4-3 in the finals, but we're not quite there yet. All right, so here's MARU sending a SCV. You can see right here. Probably more to scout than to do any harassment. For various reasons, the only worker B unit of the 3 races, which is this guy, the probe, can do harassment on its own because it is seemingly fast and has a decent attack and just has good lateral acceleration or just lateral change of speed. Okay, so here comes MARU now with a Reaper, which, you know, can jump levels the way Colossi can go up and down different levels. He's going to go straight up the ramp into an undefended Hero base. I think Hero, because the last 2 matches were pretty epic. Sorry, let me put my own headphones on. I believe that Hero was expecting on a relatively larger map, as we said, or at least medium-sized map, Data C, was expecting that MARU would do his normal focus on infrastructure, and focus on base building. But he pulls the Hero against Hero by an early attack against Hero in the southwest. They both have 2 bases, but MARU, and they're pretty equal in terms of economy and really not having a lot of soldiers. But MARU is gonna do something he doesn't always do, which is put early pressure on with just a few units, but to keep that going. Hero is starting to create units he doesn't normally create, like Void Rays and so forth, to help with his defense. Here he is building a Phoenix instead of his usual Oracle at his starport. And they're talking about how Hero is going up to 3 gates very quickly, and he puts a pylon. It's not a huge proxy because it is something that could easily turn into a base, and it's possible Hero's trying to get a base going. Now, all of a sudden, while Hero has a bigger economy with an equal army, and this is how the last game started and lasted, MARU is being way more aggressive with a Phoenix to go against, a Viking to go against the Phoenixes, but also the Cyclone and these Marines. All of these are anti-air units. He's chasing back the Phoenixes. He's chasing back the Void Ray. And I think Hero's going to go GG here very quickly because all of a sudden, while they're about even in worker units, this early on with MARU having a 23-10 lead in army power and a decent amount of money in the bank because he's spending it on Marines that are very cheap and going with only 1 Cyclone and 1 Viking, but was super effective in getting rid of that Void Ray, which used to be one of the strongest units in the game. But they had to rebalance it quite dramatically. The game balancers at Blizzard had to really rebalance because just an army of mass Void Rays was just beating everyone. Even other Protoss players, if you were faster than them, and they're great in large numbers. They can shoot from distance, but they've really been mostly taken out of the meta. They'll be used here or there. You know, I think Hero's only trying to make 1 or 2 just as a bit of defense against, for example, this Viking here is not very strong in terms of hit points, and so 1 Void Ray can take it out pretty quickly. But as we're going to see, I think we just missed. So let me see if I can go back a second here. Okay, so here we are at 4.5 minutes, and Hero is underestimating the power, the army power that's low but efficient that MARU's put together with a Viking, a Cyclone, which is fast and can attack air and ground units, and Marines, which are cheap and can attack ground and air units. So this is actually a pretty effective small army by MARU. And Hero at 4.5 minutes is still trying to sneak Adepts and some Phoenixes for early damage and harassment against MARU. But MARU is going to get the jump on these Phoenixes and the Void Ray that's coming out I believe has not been destroyed yet. Is this a proxy pylon up here in the north by Hero? Unclear to me. I don't know if we see it. But what Hero wants to do is use these Phoenixes to, what the Phoenix does, even though it's technically an air-to-air unit, is it can pick up individual ground units and basically paralyze them in the air. And while the Phoenix that does that maneuver can't attack while it's happening, any other anti-air units, including other Phoenixes or whatever, can attack that paralyzed ground units that's just sort of hovering in the air. And he's trying to do it with 3 or 4 Phoenixes, but with the Cyclone right here, which is, made to destroy squishy air units like the Phoenix, with the Marines and just 1 Viking, is going to be more than enough. So I don't know if either side even gets to more than 2 bases because this game is so short. All right, let's see the rest of this game. And, oh, there was a Widow Mine there. I don't know why disruptors, which seem to be flying or hovering, and with their big Nova explosion, only affect ground units and don't have a very big radius. I'm not sure why mines, which, any kind of landmine in history going back a long ways up until today, is to obviously take out ground units. The physics of a landmine taking out air units just doesn't make sense from a physical standpoint. But these Widow Mines that are being used by MARU, which is about to take out Hero's air units, it's not a traditional mine in that it just explodes, but it pops up and then you can actually manually aim it to shoot at things. So the reason the Widow Mine was allowed to become an anti-air mine as well as an anti-ground mine is because it's not, they call it a mine, but it's not a traditional mine. It is in the sense that it's hidden and can take out a lot of ground units. But at the same time, and this is one of MARU's top, let me put it this way. MARU is one of the best players in the world of seeding a bunch of landmines and then manually aiming them so that they always get a unit. You can already see that the Phoenixes and the Void Ray are dying very quickly. Let's go back just a tiny bit. Let's see, where are we at? That's too far. All right, so here comes the single Void Ray. Again, a single Void Ray can do a lot to help defend your base, especially with shield batteries to recharge it in other units. But a single Void Ray with a couple Phoenixes are all very squishy, low hit point air units. And so all MARU has to do, he doesn't have to have a giant army. As you see down here, continues to not have a giant army or a particularly good economy. But I'm not sure what Hero was thinking, sending a single Void Ray along with a handful of Phoenixes to MARU's base. I think Hero was recognizing that the map had shrunk, just from a practical strategic standpoint. The map had shrunk very quickly because there's such early engagements on both ends and their bases spawned pretty close together. MARU's going to recognize that a bunch of Marines and just a single Viking and a single Cyclone, which are air-to-air units, and normally pretty fragile, is going to be more than enough to take out the even more fragile air units of Hero. So at 4 minutes 7 seconds, you can see down in the mini map there's a proxy pylon up here for beaming in units for Hero, but he just doesn't have that much money right now with only 39 workers, and he's going to send a Void Ray and an Adept and some Phoenixes. Let's see what happens real quick. I'm going to do some start stops. All right, so there's a follow-up with a Raven. Ravens are unbelievably powerful Terran units. They do so many different things, just like the Oracle for the Protoss. The Raven is meant for harassment, for scouting, but it also has an interference matrix thing, which can paralyze for quite a bit of time enemy units. And along with other things, it has missiles it can shoot, which are specifically, they don't do any damage, the current version of Viking missiles, but what they do is drastically lower the armor and shields of enemy units. which is a huge debuff for your opponent, and if you can attack them while they're armored down and shielded down, it just increases your chances exponentially of taking them down. I'm not sure he even needs a Raven to take care of the situation, but it certainly doesn't hurt, just in case Hero is able to penetrate more than possible. As you can see, he's building 2 Marines at a time here. This is a reactor, which is what allows you to build multiple barracks units at once, but you can only build Marines and maybe 1 or 2 other units twice at once with the reactor. If you want to build more complex units like Marauders and so forth, you need to go up. You need to add a barracks or 2 with what they call a tech lab, and the tech lab is what allows you to produce the more elite units. But at this point in the game, where he's got a Cyclone for anti-air, a Viking for anti-air, and a bunch of Marines, more than it might seem just by looking at his offensive numbers, he is expecting, I don't know if he scouted it, because again, I can't control where the broadcasters and the producers of these games, you can only look where they show you on the map. Just really quickly, in case I haven't explained this, there's 3 trapezoids on the map. The blue is what Hero's looking at a given moment. The red is what MARU is looking at a given moment. And what we're looking at a given moment is this large white trapezoid. So whatever we're seeing on screen corresponds with the white trapezoid, so we're seeing sort of between MARU's 2 main bases, but MARU is looking at this proxy pylon up here for Hero to get rid of it, so that Hero doesn't have a close spot to beam in infantry and do his normal super fast scale up of units. Again, Hero normally likes to harass for the first 8 or 9 minutes, and then somewhere between 9 and 11 minutes launch his first attack. He's not going to get anywhere near there in terms of time that it takes to do so. Hero's looking at the middle of the map here, and so I think both MARU, you can see the build order production, building a Phoenix and an Adept, though, by Hero, which are, not only early game units, but beginning of game early game units, so really early game units, and then you usually move out of them pretty quickly. I don't know why the 2 units he's building are those, as opposed to Disruptors, Immortals, and Stalkers, which is his normal early to mid game. He is still trying to do the Hero thing of always getting more and more gateways so that he can warp in units, but again, because of how slow Protoss builds, and the fact that MARU is putting on so much pressure early on, he's not going to get those warp gates out. I don't know, did they show what units they have? Okay, so here goes back to the Void Ray again. Here's the production. So he is producing a Raven and another barracks.
As the follow-up is a Raven, I often say unless your name is MARU, you're not allowed to make a Raven against Prof.
Okay, stop again. And here again, the double Marines coming out with a single Cyclone and a single Viking. Here he comes with some Adepts and a Void Ray. I'm not really sure his plan. There's the Widow Mine. So he took out whatever, I believe he took out whatever Hero had here. If you look closely on the mini-map, just off screen to the left, the mini-map, you can see a blue dot. I'm not sure if that's a couple units or whether MARU purposefully or accidentally left a pylon there as a proxy pylon. Doesn't matter. He recognizes that Hero is coming to do a small but rapid attack against MARU, as he likes to do so early. These Adepts don't do... The Adepts are going to disappear. I don't know if they got added there with their the shading that they do, their sort of weird teleportation thing. But going up even 6 or 7 Marines, who I assume are stim-packed, a single Viking and a single Cyclone, neither of these have a ton of hit points, especially the Viking by itself, but against only a couple of Phoenixes, which are even maybe weaker, and a Void Ray, which by itself can't do a lot of offensive damage and should not be attacking even in early MARU base by itself. It should either be staying at home as defense for Hero, or just not building them at all, or being patient and building a bunch of them. I'm not sure if Hero can already smell the writing on the wall, because again, if you just look at the numbers, Hero's significantly ahead on workers. It's even in terms of military power, and just 2 heavy units, 1 flying with the Viking and 1 on the ground of the Cyclone, but they're both anti-air units, and Marines, which are both anti-ground and anti-air units. I'm not sure if Hero... let me put it this way. If this is a desperate early attack by Hero because he thinks he's getting behind, I'm not sure what information he has to give him that give him that point of view or that opinion, because he's already expanding to a 3rd and 4th base down here, and he's had a proxy pylon off screen to the left, to the north, moving towards the northeast to beam in units. So I think he's actually just trying to distract until he can beam some more units. At the moment, he's only got 2 Stalkers and 1 Phoenix being built. And because it's so early, Hero doesn't have those 20 warp gates that he normally has to beam in 1,000,000 units at once and just overwhelm the opposition with attack after attack after attack with increasing units, mid-game units, I should say, like a bunch of Stalkers with Immortals, Colossi, powered up Zealots, and so forth. So he's gonna try and come to this main base, but Maru's in perfect position. This might be an accident that Maru's in perfect position and happened to have chosen the right ramp where Hero's coming. As you can see, Maru's trapezoid here, which is what he's looking at. He is looking here, so he does know that there's at least 2 Phoenixes and a Void Ray coming, but with these units, he's not too scared. We're at, let's see, 429. Okay, and so immediately, with the only 2 Phoenixes, one of which is low on health, and the Void Ray, which has already lost shields and down to half health, with just this small but effective combo of anti-air Terran units. He is going to be able to pick up the Cyclone with the Phoenix, but the Cyclone does have enough hit points, even though it's easily destroyed by a bunch of types of opposing units. The Phoenix picks up the Cyclone using his Graviton Beam or whatever, but he doesn't have any units to attack with, so he's just picking it up. So while he briefly takes the Cyclone out of the battle, while he floats in the air in this bubble and can't do anything, it's not going to actually damage the Cyclone. And meanwhile, Hero is stuck here with a Phoenix to do so, and is already running away with his other Phoenix and his Void Ray. Okay, he noticed that was happening. He gave up on the Graviton Beam and is now in full retreat with 2 Phoenixes and a Void Ray, which is very, very weak. 3 early game, somewhat squishy, or at least vulnerable air units as 2 Phoenixes and a Void Ray for Hero. So I keep missing that there was a Widow Mine. So where's the Widow Mine? Let's see. Oh, here was the Widow Mine. There it was. So the Void Ray. So even though, as I mentioned, a single Void Ray, even at full health, it is very dangerous and so rarely used as a single attack unit. Again, you would want him to be a defender, this Void Ray, or attack with a bunch of Void Rays, because they're one of those units that only get powerful, like Vikings, when you scale them up. But at 431, I believe we just saw, I think we're... So right here, his Phoenixes are in okay shape, although they don't have a lot of energy, and I believe is full health on the Void Ray. But there's a Widow Mine around here, which again, even though it's a mine, can attack air units and be very deadly. And there's no current scouting, which is unusual, very unusual for Hero, who puts a ton of relative large number of tracking observational units to look at cloaked or burrow, to try and get a jump on any cloaked or burrowed units on the other side. But he doesn't have any eyes on in terms of things like Widow Mines, which are hidden except to units like Observers, or a couple other units which can spot hidden, burrowed, cloaked, or buried units, and doesn't have eyes on it as far as I can tell. And right there, boom, from slightly off screen down here, there was a Widow Mine. And again, because you can control manually where the mine shoots, including to the air, hits a direct shot right in the middle of the Void Ray. It's amazing it doesn't blow up, but as you can tell, this top bar, which is health, is gone. This, or shields, I should say. This bottom line, which is health, and very hard to restore, especially on the go for Protoss, is already down to half. And so here we go. He notices the Void Ray got hit badly and that he's outnumbered here. He had already activated the what do they call this? Not disruptor, graviton beam with one of his Phoenix. But as I mentioned before already a couple times, you can pick up really any sized unit with the Phoenix as long as it has energy. He doesn't have very much energy, but you need other anti-air units to then go after that unit while it's paralyzed floating up here. This is just not enough anti-air power. He's going to turn around. The Void Ray is almost destroyed. You can see fire. You can see it down in the red. He's trying to retreat this Phoenix and his other Phoenix, which is stuck in the base. The Widow Mine was really the thing that turned it around. I think he would have lost that battle anyway with just the 3 air units, but with no Oracle or other observational units to spot the Widow Mine, didn't see it coming. The Void Ray is all but exploded. Really only takes 1 or 2 more hits from any anti-air unit, including a couple Marines, to take down. And there's the Viking, which again are generally weak units, even air to air. It just does, and don't have very much health. But when you're just going after 1 or 2 Phoenixes in a Void Ray and you're well positioned and they've already lost a bunch of health from a combination of that Widow Mine, the Cyclone, which is a missile, a mobile missile destroyer basically unit, and Marines, which even 5, 6, 7 of them, whether they're stim-packed or not, can be deadly against air units. More than enough anti-air against 3 for Hero. So that Phoenix is gone, and this Phoenix is no energy to do his special. He's lost shields. This Void Ray is almost dead. Let's see if he takes out the Void Ray. Now he's trying last minute desperately to bring in another Phoenix, but it's not going to be enough to either take down this Viking or use the graviton beam. Very quickly trying to beam in with this proxy pylon that has remained here. Very quickly trying to beam in 2 Stalkers just to go after these air units, these Terran air units from MARU. But since there does not appear to be a gateway, actually this might be a gateway up here. So it's a slow warp in, which means it takes 11 seconds as opposed to 4. They're not going to be able to come in time. And so to try and buy some time in a last desperate effort, Hero sends back his handful of very damaged and about to be destroyed air units. Yep, the slow warp in already destroyed one of the 2 Stalkers. And here's MARU up 23 to 10 in military units in under 5 minutes. And as Rotterdam, the Dutch commentator, is saying, this is about as bad of a start as you will ever see from Hero, and that is definitely the case, which is why Hero's, it's not quite this quick, but in about 6, after this game, when they're tied 2-2, Hero goes back to his normal Hero thing, which is early, significant early and often harassment. Let me rephrase that, which is early harassment, which is harassment that is early and often in order to, Hero is up technically 5 workers, but preferably with his early harassment that Hero's so good at, this gap would be bigger. So MARU is getting plenty of money for the early game because it's relatively close in workers. Hero has almost no offensive units. His proxy pylons here are getting taken down. He only has 1 developed base, because again, Protoss built the slowest by far of all of the 3 races, and so his second and third bases are just getting going, so he doesn't have the economy or the area control that he needs. They're going to go after this pylon here, so he can't, MARU that is, going to go after this pylon, which will go down very quickly to this number of units, and so Hero won't have a proxy pylon that's near to MARU's base to beam in units quickly. And as just happened, as those stalkers got blown up right after they warped in, as the commentators mentioned, you only get fast warp-ins if you use the warp prism, which is the flying transport unit of the Protoss, but then can go stationary and serve as a floating pylon, basically. If you use that, it only takes 4 seconds to beam in. But if you're just coming in at a pylon and there's no nexus or there is no warp gate within a certain range of it, it takes a full 11 or 12 seconds to beam in unit as opposed to 4. So 3 times as long. The enemy's way too close. They're going to blow it up anyways, just in case. So just a sloppy open after MARU's been having the sloppy open so far and is somewhat lucky to be up 2-1. The games mostly on paper have been close, but none of MARU's starts, including game 1 where he wins, none of his starts have been particularly flawless or semi-flawless by MARU's super high standards. Which is why Hero was able to take game 1. While losing, Hero was able to take game 1 much further and make it much longer than it should have been. And then, of course, Hero had won the last 2 games. Here at 4 minutes, MARU is not screwing around, knows he doesn't need a giant force. I don't know if it was luck or he had the drop on what Hero was doing, but he was perfectly set up to go against the anti-air attack of Hero. And so it's starting to look like the first game again, right before this one ends. For a while, this one ends in 5 minutes, and the first game took a full 16, and Hero just wouldn't die. In both cases of game 4 here and game 1 that MARU also won, in both of those cases, it seems like MARU is predicting Hero's every move from the beginning. The differences in game 1, Hero used his scrappiness and some backup to the backup plans that he always has to stay in the game much longer than he should have, but he's not going to stay in this game very long with only a 10 army supply and having his entire air force, which wasn't quite big to begin with, go down early to MARU's anti-air ground forces in this one. Viking. Hero must see the writing on the wall. He's trying one more time with 2 Phoenixes to do something. Comes into the base. I don't know what he's trying to do. I guess with 2 Phoenixes, you can use the Graviton Beam to kill a bunch of these SCVs at once. But again, one of these 2 units has to pick up, has to levitate the unit, and then the other one takes him down. So you only have 1 unit to levitate and 1 unit to attack the unit that's being levitated. So even going after workers, which is a little too late to disrupt economy based on what MARU's established so far, is not going to be enough. I don't know what ultimately takes down this final desperate air attack of just 2 Phoenixes by Hero. And there goes the Raven. Here comes the Cyclone and the Viking, which is still alive, and now a Raven. Hero, I don't think, got any shots off or any specials off and is retreating. When you see Hero do full retreats this often, this early, you know he's in bad shape. Often he'll retreat early numerous times only to do an immediate secondary attack or counter attack, and then keep attacking until that 9-10 minute mark when Hero's got his infrastructure going and he can beam in a bunch of units and start going on the offensive. Not going to be enough. He does manage to barely save one of the 2 Phoenixes, but he is on his last life, and here's a Widow Mine. Again, we can see it as the observers who see everything, but Hero has not been prioritizing detection of things like Widow Mines. I haven't seen an Oracle. I haven't seen an Observer. So either he forgot about this unit or he never scouted it. And here it comes. You can see it was hard to see. There was a little thin line going from the Widow Mine to the Phoenix that had the... I'm sorry. You could see that MARU was using the Widow Mine to target the Phoenix that was closer, and also the one that had more health, because the other one is already so close to dying. I managed to deposit it just as the mini missile is coming out of the mine, and I assume it's going to hit one of the Phoenixes. It does, destroys the Phoenix in one shot, even though he had most of his health, and the other Phoenix is only half a shot away from dying. Now Hero's down to only 8 military units to 25. Can't get anything going against MARU, and that's probably a tap up. That's probably going to wrap up game 4 with a GG from Hero. Let's see. Trying to beam in more units desperately, but he doesn't have the proxy anymore. So his bases, he has to beam them in at the bases. And he doesn't have a bunch of starports or a bunch of factories, so those are going to come in slowly. He hasn't had the chance, Hero that is, to build a lot of gateways and warp gates to warp in a lot of units at once. Those couple stalkers that he tried to sneak in with the slow warp-in, as we saw just a minute ago, were easily taken down by the small but efficient army of MARU.
The previous 2 games went for Hero at the start.
Right, and just as we're about to end this 4th game, the British announcer is saying, you know, Hero's opens of the last 2 games were really excellent, whereas this one is just a total disaster from the beginning. It doesn't seem like he knows what he wants to do, and MARU is completely reading Hero's strategy from beginning to end, just like in game 1. But unlike game 1, MARU is going to be able to capitalize on it because Hero is too aggressive with the wrong units early. And so MARU probably wasn't actually expecting Hero to be so one-sided in terms of weak air units this early on without support, because that's not how he normally operates. The Oracle is the one that he will use early on, and sometimes in large numbers, and win the game with just a whole bunch of Oracles. But they are fast, and they can do all sorts of things to slow down or stop enemy units, to fire against enemy workers and take them down quickly and then get out of the way. He just doesn't have the building. You can see the construction for Hero that's going on as this game's about to end, are all buildings and a couple probes. Not going to be nearly enough.
Might be equally as bad, if not worse, actually.
Here comes in these are mules, which are when you build the orbital command, which is an upgrade from the normal command center. You can see with the radar on top, not very expensive. I believe it only costs 150 minerals to upgrade. And so unless you're building a planetary defense fortress with its giant cannons, you're definitely going to build this radar equipped command center, the orbital command. But the other thing the orbital command can do, other than scanning the map and revealing fog of war, also revealing burrowed or cloaked units, the other thing it can do is you see its energy bar up here in purple, is get what they call mules, which come down via drop pods and are basically just like giant, super efficient SCVs, which can harvest minerals very, very quickly. It's a little bit of an unfair advantage in some ways for the Terrans, especially if you're a Zerg player, because Zerg really are dependent on tons of minerals early, mid, and late game, because they can do so much with units like Zerglings that use only minerals. Against the Protoss, who need a lot of gas in addition to minerals, it's still an advantage because, as you can see, Heroes up in both minerals, workers, and therefore minerals and gas at this very moment. It's just going to take a couple of these mules coming down to give a very quick, to catalyze a very quick boost of mineral production, so that if he needs to, he can pump out a bunch more Marines at his primary base here. Doesn't look like he has a barracks set up at the secondary base. He's only mining one gold, that's from the original Warcraft and Warcraft 2 RTS. This refinery here is putting out gas for MARU. So he's really focusing on minerals production because he knows he's way ahead of the game this early on. And so he just has to pump out those double Marines from those barracks with reactors to double his force quickly. He's already ready to overwhelm Hero, but he'd rather do it without having to actually go to the base, because again, within the base you have shield batteries, which can keep a much smaller Protoss army alive much longer than it should against an opponent. And so he'd rather not have to go into the main base to end this. But I believe being up 2-1 with his awful start, I think Hero's going to recognize the writing on the wall, just as MARU did in the previous game, and end it before there's a major encounter between the two, either in the middle of the map or on Hero's end. So we're at 5.5 minutes. Here comes another attempt, but right, he's doing another follow-up with 2 Phoenixes, but well, this one's shields have recovered. His health points are low. They do have some energy, but again, with only 2 Phoenixes, you have to use one to lift up a ground unit and the other one to attack. But it's not a very powerful attack, and they're just so vulnerable because every single unit MARU has at the moment, whether it's an armored factory unit or what they call a biological barracks unit, Marines, Marauders, your typical infantry, all of those types of units have anti-air. And I'm not sure at this point why Hero is trying another anti-air attack with only 2 units, and 2 that are particularly weak and worn down. And here's the production. All of a sudden, you see way more production than you normally see from Hero. I always talk about how Hero is never building a ton of things at once, but he's always building 3, 4, or 5 things at once. But here he's trying to increase his gas really quickly, which is so hard to do because the assimilators have to assimilate into themselves to harvest the gas, but each of them also require 3 workers per refinery, 3 workers per refinery. So that takes workers away from workers that would be harvesting minerals. So that's not a strategy that's going to come into play unless he can survive a couple more minutes. Another shield battery, 2 more warp gates, another nexus, which is one of these secondary bases down here in blue, an upgrade for his zealots for the charge ability. But all of these moves are either happening too early or too late for the 5.5 minute mark for someone like Hero. So let's see what happens. So there goes Hero. Here come the Phoenixes. He's moving a barracks away. So because Terrans have the ability for their factories, their starports, and their barracks, as well as their command centers, can all lift off and move. And while they're vulnerable and move slowly while they're in the air, what you can do is switch let's say the factory has the tech lab, which produces advanced units like tanks, but can only do 1 at a time. And while the barracks traditionally has a reactor, which can produce 2 units at a time, but they're only able to produce 2 of the more simple and basic units like Marines. You can actually switch any 3 of the starports, between the starports, barracks, and factory, to each other's upgrades. So now the factory is going to be able to produce 2 units at a time. I'm not sure what he's planning on. And the barracks, he's moving to the reactor, or maybe he's moving it to the tech. Yeah, he's moving it to the tech lab to get more advanced infantry units. And because he's pushed back Hero all the way to his base, and there's no Hero presence anywhere in the middle of the map, even close, nor any kind of proxy unit to get his units close quickly, MARU does not have to worry about doing the duck, duck, goose maneuver of running around the circle and switching the exact position of his main construction buildings, main unit construction buildings. There he goes. Here come the two Phoenixes again. I don't know what he's trying to do. So here's a tank, which is in siege mode. It can attack the Phoenixes, but it's now guarding the ramp to that primary base by MARU in case there are ground units. So he is still a little afraid that MARU has ground units coming. Of course, again, we can see that that's not happening. Here come the Phoenixes in between the Marines, which have now doubled in count just because he used the reactor to build 2 Marines at once, and that Cyclone, which can take down air units so quickly because of its speed and its tracking device. These Phoenixes should go down, or at least push back super fast, and that should be game. Let's see. Yeah, it needs a miracle, as the announcer said. Boom, you can see with the lock on how far the range of the Cyclone is. I don't even know if he has visibility here, but because it's locked on, the Cyclone is able to fire that last missile, and he did manually target the weaker Phoenix just to make sure it exploded. So now Hero's down to only 6 army power, which is basically only 2 or 3 units. Mainly just this one Phoenix here, and despite still having a decent economy, a difference of 30 army power, 36 to 6 this early by MARU, and all of those failed, poorly timed, and with poor army composition attempts on MARU's bases, failing over and over again, really making 0 progress. Hero at this point is probably just delaying the inevitable of losing this game in order to try out a few things, which he's known to do. It's not that he's being a dick and trying to extend it for no reason, but he knows he has one more game after this, and if he wins it, he moves on. And while he's already lost this game, maybe he can just try a few little things to see how MARU reacts and to plant some ideas in MARU's head for that final game. So he's already prepping for game 5 here in game 4, which is just about over. He has one more Phoenix. Now he can see the Widow Mine. I guess he's got eyes somewhere. I'm not sure where, or whether he just knows that that Widow Mine is there. But if this Phoenix gets any closer, with MARU's unbelievable micro abilities to target and shoot off these Widow Mines to any kinds of units, sometimes in multiple numbers against multiple units at the same time. Just brilliant micro play from MARU. I don't know if Hero doesn't see it or just happens to avoid it. Let's see what happens. The Phoenix is just waiting here. Here comes the Cyclone. That Cyclone's going to put a target lock on to the now retreating Phoenix. The Cyclone doesn't get the target lock, so he moves back into the base. I think... So here's Hero's vision. So yeah, he still does not have eyes. Look at the map here. He had scouted the main base and an early phase of the secondary base, but he's not seeing all of the buildings in either of MARU's bases. He's not seeing any of these Widow Mines because he hasn't prioritized, as far as I can tell, a single detection unit. And so is he about to get killed to the Widow Mine? Let's see.
Couple of minutes time, they'll get more and more energy, but I mean, this situation...
Nope. But one Viking air-to-air and one ground-to-air from the speedy Cyclone that has a tracking device should take out this Phoenix and actually end it. There it goes. Boom, boom. He had enough health and moved away quick enough that he still, while he lost most of his shields, still has all of his health. They're up, but maybe not, because now the Cyclone and Viking are coming out of the base because they know the only real asset that Hero has that's made any moves on the map, while they've all been unsuccessful, could still harass them, is this one Phoenix. So they're going to rush out of the base. A Cyclone has such fast movement. I'm going to look up how fast the Cyclone is. But while most ground units are somewhere between 2 and 3.5 speed, which means they cover 2.5 to 3 spaces. If you were to put a grid on the map, that they would, whatever the speed is how many invisible grid spaces they can move at once. The Cyclone, I believe, is close to a 5, even faster than the Flying Viking. So while the Phoenix is fast, the Cyclone might be faster, or at least is fast enough with a little bit of initiative to go after this Phoenix. And is he going to target it this time and get it? Let's see. Here comes a missile. I'm not sure it was even a target. I think he was just close enough to the Phoenix. Hits the Phoenix. Now he's losing health, but he's not dead yet.
Yeah, Zealot Sentry, and that's it. I mean,
He's trying to build a bunch of sentries, is Hero, quickly in order to, he normally uses his sentry on his aggressive offensive approach to create and maintain and restore shields for his big robotic units like the Colossi or his big Stalker armies. Now he's expecting an all-out attack from MARU on his base, his own base, and is building sentries quickly to create shields and barriers and so forth to maybe buy a little bit more time.
it's like, for what?
So we're at 6.5 minutes.
Does get to see that it is. Templar Archives loses his last Phoenix. I mean,
There goes the last Phoenix. They finally got it.
Hero, he's just smiling a little bit. But that's it. 20. That's
He gets a fast warp in, but he's only got 2 infantry units and 3 sentries, which is nothing. Now he's down 52 offensive units to 18, way outnumbered. Here you can see an attack coming from Hero, or MARU, I should say, in the mini-map. This big line of red is coming straight to Hero's base, which is what he should be doing, being so dominant and ahead in military power.
20-1. Dude, like, ratio, that is terrible in this army.
Right, they're saying it's a 20-1 advantage. I'm not sure what that means. It might just have to do with how many units they're producing. But Maru's running so quickly that he has them running single file, which isn't always the best strategy because they can be picked off easily with the right units in neutral ground. But at this point, MARU is either guessing or totally aware of how far ahead he is in army power, that Hero's not going to be able to harass him, and he's just going to run as fast as possible with a Widow Mine, a couple Marauders, but mostly Marines, right at Hero's base to end it.
I don't think he has any chance of slowing this down or stopping it.
And as the announcers point out, there's really no chance of Hero slowing it down. He's even sending probes that can barely do any damage, and with a single one, only slight distraction against the Cyclone. That's not going to do anything. Destroys that probe. Now we're at 65-18 in favor of MARU. And a couple Zealots, an Archon, 1 Soccer, and 3 Sentries. You know, if anything, he should be staying in the base and try and put up a last defense. But, Hero's one weakness is, he attacks not just boldly and ill-advisedly, but in a way that, anyone who can understand and see what's going on would know that with his very tiny army, and he's already built some shield batteries, he should just sit at home in the base, hope to beam in some more units. He's got Archon and some more gateways coming and some more shield batteries. Should just sit at home and try and do a defense against this big line of Marines that's coming. But instead, he sends his small force to the southeast because he's going to try and sneak around. But the problem with that is, without any observation, he's completely missing this big line of a sizable Marine force coming to his primary base here just south of the western point.
That's pretty good and stuff, but how good can
There's the Raven.
I have the feeling that for the first time in the history,
They can't believe that Hero's still in the game. He's building a pylon that's going to immediately get destroyed. Look at all these Marines.
a straight up disaster for Hero.
Right, it's been a straight up disaster for Hero from the beginning. Too many units. He's going to easily be able to. That's some great force field work. Rather than create a guardian shield, because again, units like the Sentry have multiple special powers, as they call them, spellcasters, which come from the Warcraft days. But spellcasters just means that in addition to the regular attack, they have special attacks. And sentries have a few. One is a guardian shield, which creates a shield around a whole group of soldiers and reduces the number of damage. But they can also create these force fields to help stop and divide, and hopefully divide and conquer the enemy. But it's just too many units, and look how many infantry units got in front of the force fields put up by these 3 sentries. They're going to get killed quickly. The Archon's going to get killed quickly. These units that are on the left side of the force fields are going to get this Archon and this shield battery, and that should be game over.
Nothing will save him, and they are good, but Maru's micro is good as well. He goes for the hot pickups
Right, Hero has the superior micro overall to MARU, but MARU's micro is well above average, obviously, which is why he's one of the best players in the world and always makes the top 16, 8, or 4 at least of tournaments. It's plenty good because you combine that with his brains for overall macro strategy and long-term plays with his units, and those force fields just didn't do nearly enough. MARU up 60 to 28 in military. This actually goes a little bit longer than I expected.
Is that an army, Ben? It's too big, it's too powerful, and we are going to a deciding game 5.
And here he comes. This was Hero's third base. And, again, it's hard to know what you should do. The second base is always the obvious one because it's right down the ramp from your first base and it defends your primary base. So they call it the natural. But after that second base or natural base, where you put your third base really depends on the map and the strategy and what your opponent's doing. So rather than go to the first two bases of Hero, he makes a quick right turn to the southeast with his military units to go after this completely undefended Hero base. Hero's going to try and warp in a few units, plus he's got this Archon. He got one shield battery, one pylon, but this is going to go down quickly. We'll see if Hero even lets that happen before surrendering.
Oh, we certainly are. That's just what we want, right? The last pylon here at the third base goes down. The Archon on the left side is trying to deal damage, but that is just too much bio.
Too much bio from the Terrans with support. Smiling Assassin, not smiling so much right now. Now the army differential is, it might as well be infinite because of how few powerful units Hero has. They're spread out. It's not good compositions. And MARU, now that he's got Medivacs and he's still keeping the Cyclone alive, doesn't matter whatever happened to the Viking because they're not so powerful. But the Viking took down the Phoenixes much earlier in the Void Array. So now he's got Marines and Marauders supported by Medivacs, which just constantly are healing them and can transport them out of the war zone. But that's not even going to be necessary. Yeah, the numbers aren't there. MARU is now finally ahead in probes, so even the economic advantage is lost by Hero. Hero still hasn't surrendered. I'm not really sure what Hero thinks he can do at this point. MARU's units are now going to the north. I'm not sure if he's just regrouping or whether he's going to go all the way home. He might expect that Hero is doing a sneak attack, and Hero indeed, as you can see, if you look closely, these blue units down here are going to try and sneak in. But you can see from the just small number of the tiny army power of Hero and the relatively small number of units in this little eastern attempted sneak by Hero won't be nearly enough. And here is a command center, which again, the Terrans have that huge advantage of being able to build their command centers behind their own lines and then fly them forward to establish forward bases with them. And they're already pre-built, and he's already started to send his SCV worker bots there to get the third base going. So MARU, while he's been dominating the whole time and continues to increase his domination, is just relentless, and he's going to build that quick third base just in case Hero can pull something out of his butt and keep this going longer. Because again, in the very first game, the game should have been over in 8 or 9 minutes, as is going to happen here because of how dominant MARU was. Ended up going 16 minutes and pushing MARU to the brink, even while he was seemingly dominating Hero the whole time. Pushed MARU to the brink in game 1. MARU did end up winning, but he hadn't planned enough micro, and so Hero was able, or macro, I should say, in terms of base expansion and improving his units and upgrades and so forth. So he's not taking any chances. He's establishing his forward base, which is going to the base area, not to the far north or to the far east, but the one towards the center, which is hard to defend over a long haul, but it brings him much closer to the forces and bases of Hero, and he's way outnumbering, and so this is a relatively safe move. Even if this gets blown up, it's just distracting from what Hero can do with his tiny army.
Let it sink in and be like, all right, let's start
Yeah, and the announcers just said what I've been saying probably a few too many times, which is Hero is letting it sink in, knowing it's going to be a tense game 5, and he has to regroup and do much better in the next game to win and move on. And so the announcer saying what I said a couple minutes ago, which is Hero is using this time to just try out a few different things and put some, maybe false or tricksy ideas in Maru's head with his great mind game psychological warfare that Hero does. But look at this. I mean, a couple Archons, a couple infantry units, and 1 or 2 sentries just is not going to be able to do anything against all of these bio forces supported by a ton of medevacs and a Raven, which can debuff the enemy so quickly. He's charging right into Maru, and while Hero often will do this during the game, and is happy to exchange forces, because when you trade 1 for 1 in terms of army power and you're on the offensive, you might lose as many units as your opponent, but it does buy you time to get that base building and base expansion continuing and accelerating, as Hero still needs to do as a Protoss player at only 8 minutes and 18 seconds. So he's rushing right into battle for one last little charge to see some matchups and maybe do some mental math. Nothing he can do. He's running away. One last desperate attempt to rush against Maru. I can't believe Hero hasn't good gamed yet, because all of these retreats, I mean, Hero rarely retreats without turning around and then doing a counterattack or secondary attack, whatever you want to call it. And normally he would have way more gateways and way more pylons to beam in those stalkers to support. It's not happening for him. He's got no eyes on the map in terms of scouting. His production is not nearly enough at 8.5 minutes with only 51 workers. He's still got his tiny army.
All you can do with them is attack, move, and maybe some warp prism micro, but there's no warp prism on the field. I mean,
right, there's no warp prism, as they said. No way to beam in units. So this is it. Trying to repair themselves with one sentry, which can repair shields, and 1 shield battery, which is, their only purpose is to repair shields. It's just not going to be enough against this many ground infantry units supported by air. He's digesting the loss, as Rotterdam points out on the broadcast. Yep, Zealots do. He did get that counterattack going with that eastern push that I was talking about in the brand new third base of Maru. That they very briefly just showed those Zealots, but the harassment strategy by Hero is too little, too late.
That's great if you have an army at home, but those Zealots, that is pretty much the army.
Yeah, the Zealots is the only army, because what's left of it is here and getting absolutely destroyed. Now Maru has a full 50. It has a full 50 supply lead when you combine the workers and army units. Very hard with that type of gap in supply, especially with how many failures Hero has had on the offense so far in his poor army compositions. So an absolutely wonderful, brilliant, flawless game by Maru to take out Hero much quicker than Hero gets taken out. As I mentioned before, when Hero wins, it usually is over, or is often over by this point in the game, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11. And if it's not, Hero has built up a big army for offensive after offensive after offensive. He's got none of that. And Maru's finally doing an offensive push after playing so defensively this game in all the games. And it's just going to be too much for Hero. There go all of Hero's units. That Nexus is about to go, and there it is. Victory by Maru. All right, so that was a much longer... I did a lot of stop-start on that one. So that actually went quite a bit longer than I was expecting, because I did do start-stop so much to point out strategy. Spoiler alert, we're going to come back in a couple minutes and do Game 5. Hero is not only going to win that game, but it's going to be a dominating, relatively fast win in Hero style with early harassment and early offensive pushes. And it's going to be very decisive when Hero wins that 5th game, that in this at this tournament, at this year, at this moment, Hero is a little bit cleaner and a little bit more aggressive and a little bit ahead of MARU. And is going to knock out MARU in the semifinals of Atlanta. And we'll go on after that 5th game and another break, a longer break after that to do Bunny, because that goes the full 7 games, so it takes quite a while, especially because Bunny goes up 3-1 and Hero has to come all the way back. But you can see just on the YouTube counter that there's only 7 minutes left, including the break after this game. So you know whoever wins game 5 just by looking at the YouTube time code, it's not going to take very long. So it's tied up 2-2. MARU finally played a clean game in terms of the opening. Hero finally played a really poor opener. And so just like Hero has won a couple games in this series because MARU hasn't had great openers, here MARU has the good opener and Hero has the pretty pathetic one, and the tables are turned. And so in some ways this 5-game series is not representative of what these guys can do. At least in all 4 of the games. Game 1 and game 2, with how relatively long they went, it was a little bit closer, but the last 2 games, in game 3, you had a sloppy opener by MARU, and a fairly easy win by Hero. Game 4 here, Hero was the one with the sloppy opening, and MARU with a mostly flawless base building, expansion, defense, and then attack to end it in well under 10 minutes. And we'll just have to see what goes on in game 5. Obviously, Hero's going to win. I haven't watched that particular game in a while because it's so fast. But we'll see if we can hone in on the short and decisive victory of Hero in game 5. So thank you for joining me. These are all going pretty long, but you know what? Keeping videos an hour or hopefully less is something I've really been trying to work on over the years. And so we're going to do 1 game at a time with Hero and MARU. And we'll do 1 or 2 games at a time with Bunny, depending on how long they go. So thank you for joining me, and can't wait to have you back for Hero vs. MARU, Game 5 in the DreamHack Starcraft 2 Masters from Atlanta this past November in the semifinal against rival MARU between these 2 unbelievably Korean players. Thanks again so much, and see you soon for Game 5.